Hello, welcome to HPDO Online. We're about to talk about an important topic, data and analytics. My guest today is Dinanath Kholkar. He's the Vice President and Global Head of Analytics and Insights of Data Consultancy Service. Welcome, Dina. In our research study, we showed that a focus on data and analytics is improving business performance. Our study also includes great examples, such as the Dutch Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management, Tata Steel, and Vivat. Can you share an example with us?
So we've been doing this for many of our customers globally, be it banks, be it telecom companies, be it manufacturing companies. So, we've applied the entire approach of data maturity leading to business excellence across industries. I would like to take a very specific example from within the Tata Group as an example. So within the Tata Group, we have actually embarked on a journey of making our organizations data centric and make our senior executives focus on data centricity and data maturity as a primary goal as compared to process maturity. And within the Tata Group, we have been driving this entire excellence journey with the Tata Business Excellence Model, which is called TBEM. And we have now extended the TBEM with the data maturity model, which is powered by the DATOM framework of Tata Consultancy Services. And we have covered over the last 12 to 18 months about 12 Tata Group companies. And we are very proud of the fact that we have made very good progress. And the senior executives of the group have started to see that as a very big differentiator and a very important step in our entire journey of excellence.
That's impressive, these examples. Thank you. Can you elaborate a little bit more on how to engage with the board and with senior management?
Yeah, sure. As I always use the term data centricity, I would like to give a quick clarity around what this term really means. So data centricity is all about taking a very holistic approach on looking at data as a key enabler for your business. It is not about doing a small change in one of the departments or change in one particular business or doing something which is a transformation on the technology side. It is a much more holistic approach. So that is one thing, that you need to take a very holistic view about how data is used in your organization and in the overall ecosystem in which your business runs. The second thing, data needs to be accurate. And that is the one key element that we always look at. The single source of truth has to be your data. And that's how it is to be designed. That is how organizations need to build up things. And the third thing is real-time insights from that data being used for decision making. So when you look at data centricity in this way and the holistic approach, that is how organizations have to transition to becoming data centric. And very importantly, to understand this, we as professionals have to play a very critical role in evangelizing this. Many a times we find that many senior executives are not fully aware of when we talk about data centricity. They have a very different view about what it really means. And hence the evangelization of educating people, getting them to appreciate various things is very critical. And in this journey, helping them through that journey is the first step of understanding where you are. And the best way to do an understanding of where you are is through an assessment. And the findings of such an assessment or the benchmarking that you would do plays a very critical role of getting the business stakeholders as well as the top management of the company a very good understanding of where their organization is on the overall maturity.
In the first workshop, we had a good discussion on monetizing data. The consensus was that most of the organizations were focusing on improving the internal processes. The survey data confirmed this focus. Less than 20% of the participating organizations indicated a 5 or higher score on a 0 to 7 Likert scale for their monetization abilities. Do you see many organizations who also include the other two types of monetization? One, wrapping information around products and services, and 2, selling information offerings to new and existing markets.
So let me first start off by saying that monetization is not something which is new. It is something which has always been there in the industry. There are companies who have data as a core to their business model and data monetization as part of their overall strategy. So you take examples, and I'll specifically quote examples. You look at the Thomson Reuters or the Bloombergs of the world, who are primarily providing market data information to capital market companies. Then you look at various research companies, market research companies, and you look at the Nielsen company, for example, which does a lot of research on various products which are through the CPG products which are being used in on retail stores, or they look at creating insights into how people are watching different of the entertainment channels and stuff like that. So monetization as such, if you really look at it, is core to some of the businesses. What has changed is that organizations suddenly started realizing that, hey, I have a lot of data, I can monetize this data, I can make money out of this data. They need to keep in mind that they have to make a fundamental change in their business model, and it is a very clearly a board level decision. Are you going into making money with your data, and what does it entail? It is not that easy to say that I have data and I can make it now available and I can market that data. There are various regulations, there are various controls that you need to put in place. The business model itself has to evolve and stuff like that. So yeah, it is early stages for organizations who are traditionally not necessarily looking at data monetization as an area to go into that space. So before going into that, what I advocate, and you could probably read an article written by our practice head on data democratization. Organizations need to look at the culture of democratizing data, and that is a fundamental to monetization, saying that if I have data, I will first make it available to within the organization or to within the ecosystem in which I run this business, and then start looking at if that is something which is becoming valuable to somebody, and I can probably put in more value add on that particular data and then monetize it. I think makes a lot more sense. So I think it is an important aspect of this entire journey. I'll give you a few other examples in the current context of the COVID situation that everybody is faced with, right? You look at the supply chains which have got disrupted. The basic element of a supply chain is about democratization of that data as to where are the goods coming from, what are the different channels that it flows through, and stuff like that. If there is a disruption in that particular supply chain, what are the different mechanisms by which you can actually reroute and make things available to the consumer are very critical aspects. Unless you actually democratize that data and then monetize it, it will not be a fruitful thing. So we started to see one of the biggest changes that I have seen in the last 3 to 4 months is the importance of data and its importance in case of the entire adaptability and the resilience that businesses have had to build up in the context of the change scenario, or the new normal, or in some form we call it as our new beginning for our customers. They've started to realize that they have to look at data in a completely different way. And hence, I believe that it will be a journey that organizations will embark on. It is an important thing for them to ask the question, saying that I have a value to my data. Should I make it as part of my changed business model on making that data available, and then go through that entire process? So it's very important to keep this aspect in mind, that it is just not about monetization and making data available. You also need to look at what are the changes that you need to do in your policies, in your board level, and then enablers from a technology point of view to make that data available to various consumers.
Another important finding of the study was that most of the participating organizations didn't have their basics right. None of the surveyed organizations could be qualified as best in class on all 5 basic aspects. We identified data management, 2, analytics and automation, 3, inclusion of external unmanaged data and open data, 4, the inclusion of data lakes and active data warehouses, and lastly 5, cloud adoption. as the 5 basic factors. What, in your opinion, is the most important basic factor?
So if you look at the entire maturity model that we talked about, it is a very holistic approach covering all dimensions of process, people, data, and technology. So when you look at it, and each of these areas have very specific elements to this 4 areas. So each of them have a weightage depending on your nature of your business. So I would not never make a generic statement saying that one particular area is important versus another one, because it is the context of your business that a particular area is important or less important. And so far, the area of data, the area around data technologies and usage of data has predominantly been considered as a CIO agenda. As the business have started realizing that the digital era requires data at the core of it, and hence the involvement of business has started becoming more and more into this, the appreciation of what data can potentially do to the businesses and how digital gets enabled with data is driving a lot of organizations to think differently. And in that context, there are these areas which will get different levels of prioritization. So to respond back to your question directly, organizations which operate in an ecosystem where they have a lot of sharing of data to be done to enable just to run their business, instead of data being shared over files or FTP protocols and various other means, cloud can play a very significant role in just data exchange. There could be data marketplace like technologies which could come into play. And then there are a whole lot of other aspects which would come in. Once you put all your stuff onto the cloud, you will always have the concern about what about privacy, what about different types of regulations, what about security of the data. A lot of those things follow. And that is all what you talked about, the data management and the different principles of managing this type of different models that you will create. So all in all, when you really look at it from a adoption and when you look at prioritization of some of these things, it is very important to involve the business stakeholders. They need to give you a perspective of what they are thinking about the business. Where do they see the opportunities? So today, to a large extent, people are looking behind and saying that, okay, I have this data. What are the type of things am I doing with the data and stuff like that? To completely changing, saying that I potentially can build up a new business using this data, or I can build up partnerships based on data and stuff like that. So if you really look at it from that perspective, data, rather than being a defensive strategy element, can become an offensive strategy. So all of us who have played sports can very well realize the value of changing this type of a mindset from being a defender, which is like saying that, hey, somebody comes and questions you, I have the data to prove that I have done everything right, vis-a-vis saying that I have this data and I can do something very unique and different. So creativity, design thinking will become a very, very critical element when people will start looking at data driven businesses or businesses which are driven with data centricity at the core of it. So I think that's the way I would really like organizations to start thinking from a future perspective.
Again, very insightful, thank you. Another research finding was that 7 of the 9 data-centric HPDO organizations, our top quadrant, had conducted a data and analytics assessment, where over 50% of the surveyed organizations never had conducted an assessment. Are you surprised?
No, not at all surprised. It is quite likely that there are two types of possibilities. One is they possibly did some assessments purely from a technology point of view. There are many organizations which do assessments to understand their data landscape and technology landscape, and that never goes up to the top management at all. You know, so as I mentioned, when we talked about the assessment that we did and what we are recommending, it is a complete top-down approach from the senior management downwards, and we don't see that type of a thing at across the board. The numbers are relatively small, and as I mentioned, when it comes top down, like what has happened in the Tata Group, where our chairman himself has given that diktat to the leadership team, saying that they should focus on data maturity. It is getting done in a top down manner. So it is important for organizations to realize that even if you do a data maturity assessment and you don't involve the senior leadership, it is not really going to make a difference to you. Okay, so it is not about just doing a maturity assessment, but doing it the right way. Otherwise, we have seen many organizations, when you go into them, they say, yeah, we have done something of some sort, some assessments we have done, we have got somebody coming and doing, and we'll find that it is not a holistic approach. It is not covering the business dimension. It is covering predominantly the technology aspect. Or in some cases, people would purely look at it from a consumption point of view. What data I have and how am I using the data? So the holistic approach is very critical, and it has to happen top down. And the reason why you probably wouldn't have seen that number of people respond to that is because they have not really done this in a holistic top down manner, and that is where the gap is. So that is reason I started off with saying that as a professional, one of the things which I say is I have to be evangelist first. So I go and spend a lot of time whenever I go and talk to business leaders and various of my clients. The first thing which I do is I have 4 slides, which are, I call them as education slides. And I actually educate them on those 4 slides, saying that this is what you guys should know from a very basics point of view. And if the senior leaders do not understand this, it becomes very difficult for me to drive any further conversation, because subsequently when people go to them for budgets, for implementing certain programs, if their senior leadership doesn't understand why it is important and why it is critical, they potentially would end up with just keeping on questioning them and not necessarily enabling them. So that aspect is very critical.
Okay, we're about at the end of the interview. In the last roundtable, we discussed data literacy. Can you share your view on this important topic?
Yeah, so one of the things which I ask some of my customers is that, do they measure their people on their data competency? It's a very interesting question. When you actually go into any organization, when you look at CVs, for example, you'll generally have technical competencies, what you have studied in the background, what projects you have done, what type of businesses you have got involved with, so your domain expertise, or somebody might say, I've worked on different countries and stuff like that. But the knowledge that you have about your data doesn't necessarily get valued and measured by companies. So when HR leaders look at valuing people, they don't necessarily value them for their knowledge of data. And the reason I got to appreciate this much better is that we used to do a lot of transformation, especially on the business operations for our customers, and business process optimization, business process transformation. And one of the things which I used to always do is I used to go looking for those people who had a very strong understanding of the data. And I would actually have them retained as part of the core team, because they would really carry the knowledge. I just wanted to give you this prelude to respond back on data literacy. So many times organizations make a mistake of not realizing the value of the knowledge that people have about data. Whenever it comes to data science and whenever it comes to large data analytics program, the first thing they start looking at is going out into the market and start hiring people with a very high degree of proficiency in data science and mathematics and modeling and various other things and data technologies. And it is actually easier for a person to get trained on many of these technologies, and it is much more difficult for somebody to understand about your business and your data. And that, I feel, is a very big mistake that many people do on not understanding this very fundamental aspect. So that's one critical element of the data literacy, about knowing your data and valuing the people for the knowledge of the data. The other thing to look at is data literacy is also in the context of transformation. We talked about transformation, we talked about new business models and stuff like that. So it is a culture change, for organizations to suddenly change from what they were, which was very process centric, to being data centric. And that's a change which you are to look at, from being product centric to being purpose centric. And I did talk about it in some of my write-ups that I do and my blogs. But it's very important for people to understand that change management is also very critical. And in that context of change management, you need to bring in data literacy as a very strong element. So the basics of understanding what is the data that I require to run my business, what is this data's role in the context of decision making, and how is this entire thing going to change as my business changes, or as the world changes from becoming where it is today, adopting digital technologies, adopting cloud technologies in a significant way. What will change and what type of things will come in? How does AI become integral to my business? A lot of these changes are lined up for happening. In that context, people understanding the change is very critical. And hence, the entire topic of data literacy is very critical for people to appreciate and understand, and they have to go through this change. There is no way out. And I have been running these type of programs within TCS itself, where we are orienting a lot of our associates who have been largely process managers or process operations guys. We've been educating them on data. It starts off with basics of just understanding your data or seeing your data in form of visualization and things like that, and then you can do a lot more next steps with your data. So that's the way I would put the entire topic of data literacy.
Thank you, Dinanath Kholkar, for sharing your insights. Thank you for watching.